Welcome to the conversation series of OkCK. Today's guest is very well-known figure in Indian VFX field, Biju Thanapalan, popularly known as Biju D. He is a pioneer in setting up the early VFX studios in Mumbai. PK, Three Idiots, Ferrari Ki Savari, Bhoodnath, Johnny Gaddar, Nayana, Khaki, Murder, Jajantaram Mamantaram, Raz, Khiladi, Badshah, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, 1947 Earth, Ghulam, the list is unending. Biju has successfully contributed to 120 films as VFX director across Bollywood, UK, Hollywood, and French productions, winning several awards and nominations. He has been a faculty at the School of Art, Design and Media at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Please welcome Biju D. Thanks, Biju, for finding time and coming all this way.
Thank you so much for having me over, actually.
See, when I look at history of VFX in India, probably. When I came from Institute and started working in Bombay, the earlier period, like I'm talking about very late 80s and 90s beginning, FX was in camera mostly. And I remember having books about it, how to do in-camera effects and all that. And I remember having going through shoots like a Mitchell camera with a glass sheet in front of it and black paper, cut pieces, small pieces and all that. Pereira Saab and all that, which was like a magic happening on the floor. We all used to stand around it and figure out like what exactly is happening, and that was the life of VFX. We never imagined something like that could be done on a computer. Computer itself was absolutely a remote thing, and one has never seen a computer till then. So from there, the travel to that these effects could be done on a desktop sitting in a air-conditioned room was something which was completely, changing the perception of filmmaking altogether. And you are one person who has gone through that, the transition period from the beginning, though you were not part of the earlier physical VFX situation, but you saw the transition happening into VFX getting into your, office rooms and desktops. So how was it? How was the feel?
You mentioned Pereira, sir. No? So I've worked with him. I worked with him.
Okay.
Mitchell camera. So I really enjoyed working with him. He was a very nice man. He explained a lot about Mitchell camera to me onwards. So I really enjoyed working with him. We had a great relationship. We used to meet otherwise also, and hats off to those people because the effort which used to go behind those cameras and the conviction you have to have in yourself and the equipment was amazing, because you've taken the shot, that's about it. I mean, you're done. When
you can't redo it.
You can't redo it. You really can't redo it. And even the masking, the way, the confidence they have had in that, it's absolutely fabulous. And a lot of, even when in my initial career, a lot of physical effects I used to use, because that time I don't think CG was to that extent. For example, natural elements, fire and water and all that. So I had to deal with all of that. Yeah, so I had a chance to actually sit and work with those people to figure out what kind of an explosion to, how can we drop water from height to all that. I had good fun. Plus,
this is after you came out of the engineering backdrop.
After engineering and after my design course. Yeah, this is all after that. And the reason why I came into this profession was also because I thought this was a field where I could combine both my aspirations in terms of the artistic journey which I wanted to take.
You're fascinated with cinema?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cinema, of course, and the science behind the cinema. When I say science behind the cinema, it includes the narrative, it includes the camera, it includes all the faculties of filmmaking, plus the technicalities of. I've opened up cameras, so very fascinating field. So I have seen the transition happening, and I worked on both sides. So I must say that I was fortunate enough to work on both.
How was your initial experiences with meeting with producers, and how could you ever propose to somebody like I will do it at home?
So I come from a very different background. None of my family members are into film. In fact, they were not really happy with the film, me going into the film.
The black sheep.
Black sheep, of course. And Like everybody else, I had stars in my eyes too. Going to a theater and watching a film and coming out of it and an experience in itself, then natural extension of thinking is to say, okay, imagine if we could make one like that. So that led me to the film industry. Plus then, in the film, visual effects was one field I thought I could pursue both my aspirations, the technical as well as the artistic aspirations. That's how I came into
You were a
this.
techno kid.
Visual effects, per se, it is a techno art, I must say. So it's very difficult to draw a line between technology and art in this field. So for me, there's no distinction. I'm in life also that way. I don't distinguish between art and technology. For me, it's like this one continuous thing. Yeah. So that again, the transition from the star-driven filmmaking to sensible films. It was a happy transition there. So yeah, I had gone through multiple stages of, wondering, am I in the correct place? Wondering, are these human beings?
But what would you go and tell a producer? Like, how would you convince anybody for that matter? Like, this could be done on a computer. This effect or like this problem you have, I can solve it at home.
Initially, I don't think nobody believed visual effects can be done in India.
Now I'm talking about the concept of visual effects, something which only Pereira Sahab could do in a camera. And you're saying, I'll take it home and do it and show it to you.
No, the initial ones, I did it in a studio, or rather, we had a studio called CMM Studios those days. So they had invested a lot of money on the equipments, and somehow things didn't work out. So I was called in and given this huge, expensive machine and said that, okay, listen, you're from IIT, so you know it. I didn't know anything about that machine. I said, yeah, I know it. Because I couldn't lose that.
As long as you don't know it, I know it.
Exactly. If you don't know, then I know it. So I took it on. Sleepless nights, literally, and otherwise also.
What kind of machine?
We had something called a Flame, which was running on a silicon graphics machine. I remember, I think or early 2000 or 1999, they paid around 6 crore of rupees for that one compositing machine. 6 crore. This is just for the compositing machine. And then they also had a film scanner from Oxbury, which costed another crore. They had a film printer, which costed roughly around the same time. So they had a large investment sitting there and didn't have much revenue coming in. So as a last-ditch effort, I think they put me in. Then
What was the clientele? Advertisements or?
I only worked for features.
Feature films. Okay.
Very, very less.
Because these things normally come through commercials, actually.
Commercials. Commercials have been actually on the cutting edge of visual effects. But Western Outdoor used to do that most of the job. And my frequency was not really with the commercial. So yeah, then there is one film came, which was Amir Khan's Ghulam. That was one of the earlier films. And there's a scene where Amir is running against a train and jumping off the track. I remember when we filming, they never had trust on visual effects, and I can't blame them because nothing had been done at that point in time. So they did take a safety shot using a long lens along the rail track, so it really couldn't make out the distance. So they had a backup, and they had to have a backup. It was done in New Bombay. There was a railway yard there, and that's where we shot. Night shoots, 12 nights. So I had only one night shoot, which was supposed to be the first or second night shoot. So I went all the days there, and final day I got the chance to take the shot. That really worked.
So every day they were trying to do it.
No. Every day I had to be there. They were doing other things.
That's what I'm saying. They were doing it in another way.
Because the whole scene was there. No? So that was being shot there.
So who actually came to you with the idea, like, let's do it on?
because CMM Studio was established at that point in time as an entity, and there were a couple of marketing people who were really aggressive. And they went and met those people and then convinced and said, look, there's this guy from IIT who can do it. so that's the time I also wondered, can I or no? But it worked. Those shots worked. And then I didn't have to actually look back and then film after
But
film.
that was basically publicized as he actually did it.
It is yes and no, because he did run against a train, because as a backup shot, we had to have other. But there was just about sufficient gap.
I've heard of a award function where the guy on the stage narrating the story of how dangerously Amir jumped out of the track and all that.
I mean, he did run. He did run. But
That's
I'm
not what you used finally.
what they used is CG.
CG work. Because I remember seeing that green screen footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is still. I think I still might have that green screen footage.
Because I've seen it. I mean, I don't know how I saw it. Sometime, like, I mean, I came to. I don't think I knew you that time. But somebody showed that screen to me in a theater. Like, I mean, this is,
really?
Yeah, not a theater. One of those small places in the VFX studio. Somebody showed it to me, and I was really like, I mean, surprised. Like, this could be done. And then I heard the story of, like, I mean, it was being, people were generally, this is a question I'll ask you later, like, I mean, how the industry see VFX work or achievements in today's time, which we'll come to later. But let me go through this this part of VFX, like the earlier part. Like, you can continue on that story. And what are the first films you did, or the first setups you set up?
I think my first film was a Ravina Tandon film. Sorry, I can't remember the name of the film. But the second film was Ghulam. And because those shots worked, and I still remember that the studio owner said, no, we'll have to go out in the public and said, look, we did that one. I said, it really doesn't matter now, because people would come to theater to see Amir's stunt. Nobody would come to see Biju's visual effects. But the people who really wanted to know...
Even nobody knew Perera Saab either.
Correct. So people who mattered, they knew. And that's how, I think in the first year, we did probably around 20, 30 films in a year. Which is, there was a time, the second year, I think, another 40 films or so.
What were the kind of stuff?
What kind of...
Generally, like what?
Those days, most of the things were either to save money.
That even today.
That's how visual effects is looked down up or up to whatever we can say. It's either saving money, or it's too risky to do it, or somebody's date is not available. So okay, we go use a tube, get the shot, and when date is available, then you shoot on the green screen. So such things were. But I think much later than it came as a kind of an art form, as to take the narrative forward in using visual effects.
People could think, like, this is also an option which we could incorporate.
Correct.
For storytelling.
Correct. Storytelling as a tool. But again, a majority of it is still either to save money or the traditional way of doing things.
Yeah. So, what is the kind of resources you used to get those days?
Resources was zilch. Yeah? But since we had this flame, the machine, which was on a silicon graphics machine, I think today's iPhone might be slightly more powerful than that machine. We also had a silicon graphics machine in IIT. So one frame render, which is not very complicated, like 3 lights or 2 lights or 3 lights and simple object. It used to take 7 hours to render one frame. Yeah. So when you say resources, let's just look at the resources available or needed for a visual effects. Now, one of the biggest resources is manpower. It's not in terms of numbers, but in terms of the quality of the manpower which is required. Because inherently this art form is highly technical, and you'll have to overcome this technical difficulty and come into the scheme of narrative storytelling aspect. So we it's very difficult to get people to actually kind of, you know, overcome the technical difficulties and come to the narrative, or go vice versa. Okay, this is what we want to say. What is the resources what we have, and how do we achieve this with the given resources? We didn't have many people at that point in time, so that is one of the biggest lack of resource which I faced. And of course, computing power, that will never be sufficient. Even today, even if you, so 7 hours, if it is, then now it is 1/20th of a second, but even then it is not
Still, you
sufficient.
think it's slow.
You feel it
I
is
complain about my editing machine.
exactly. So that's always going to be there. But I think the biggest resource, lack of resource, is this one. And the second round of people, which is the filmmakers and other, their understanding of,
That's what I was talking actually, you know, like
And-
how people perceived it, and whether the production was willing to give you anything on that set to, or what kind of things you asked for.
yeah. So from a film camera, you had to see it on a monitor. We used video assist. The initial thing in Bombay, we had 1 or 2 video assist, and it was in high demand or whatever. So I always used to insist that I need a video assist to have, because otherwise the cinematographer is the only person who is watching that thing, and I had to get a specific frame in a specific way to so I had no option. But in certain cases, we had to composite on location. So there was a huge setup which used to happen, because those days were analog compositors. So the switcher will come. There is the whole tamjam used to be there, which was difficult. Which was difficult to set it up, which definitely pinched the producer. But you know, when they calculated the overall cost of, you know, taking so many people to Switzerland and then hanging the hero down from the cliff, this worked out cheaper for them. So
You don't have to pay half the people.
half the people. So that actually was a convincing power I had to say that, look, listen, if you were to do that, this is what it is. If you do it here, you just spend this much, get these equipments, we can do it. That's how it worked.
How could you explain these things to your actors? Like, just imagine a train coming, you know, like, I mean, I'll tell you, I'll give you a cue to jump, you know, what did they feel? Because they have never done things like that before.
Yeah, which is an essential drawback of a green screen shoot. That we'll come to it later. But in the train case, since you have mentioned that one, out of the 12 nights, Amir would have spoken to me on 4 nights, the same shot, multiple times. How are you going to do this? So then I'll say, okay, I'll put the green screen here, and then you run from here. But where will I jump up? So at one point in time, after 3rd day, I thought either he has dementia, which really worked for him in his later film, which he acted, Gajini. Or I don't think I am convincing him, or what's wrong. So
No, I know him.
basically,
He gets into the route.
road.
Yeah.
So, but then I think he was trying to figure out, okay, how it's going to be done.
Yeah.
And the second thing, what he was trying is actually to make sure that, okay, look, this guy knows what he is talking about.
That also, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think at the end of the day, I remember.
And he himself has been trying to figure it out. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
At that time, late 90s, it was, nobody knew actually something like this could be done.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
keep watching Hollywood films and you wonder how it was done. And I remember sitting with a VHS tape and going back and forth, you know, frame by frame to
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
out what actually they did.
Correct.
Till the tape stopped working, you know, you go back and forth. And still you couldn't figure out. Like,
Very true, very true. But I think Amir was very supportive during the shoot. I remember there was another scene where he was climbing up a 12-storied building to the heroine's house. For that, when we had to shoot, we were shooting the foreground plate. So I came a little early on the set, and I was standing there and looking at the facade of the house which is made. So he came from behind and tapped, and then, what are you thinking? I said, I wish the window was 3 feet little on this side, and this was a little longer. So what happens then? I said, then you can leave the pipe and walk on the ledge. 4 steps you can walk, so there's nothing to hold, which would increase the. He said, that's a good idea. So that day shoot was cancelled. So then the production executive came and said, look, there is a door behind. You run from there because the producer is coming from front door. You better leave from the door. So yeah, it was postponed.
Yeah.
And that day we didn't shoot.
That's amazing because
Yeah, he was
actively
very
involved in
supportive.
it and
Yeah. So, but then it was cut. The whole set was cut and then extended, and all that happened. But it worked very well.
yeah.
So
Because I'm trying to explain it. Because you were shooting on floor level, he could do that walk from the wherever he was climbing to the window. And if it is actually on a 14th floor building, impossible for him to do that. But you will project it as it is happening on the 14th floor of a building. So that thing becomes much more
correct. So when you're asking how do you explain these things to the actors, most of the actors, they are intelligent enough to understand this one thing. And another thing is that we also add some, like what you mentioned, on the floor. I made a ledge which is 4 or 5 feet high. So there is still
till you feel that.
You're
not on the floor.
not on the floor. So small things,
Right.
such things when you add,
Right.
you don't let him be on the ground. So you make him feel a little uncomfortable in that one. So that comes out natural. Plus their acting capabilities would take it up further.
And they consider this emotional aspect a lot.
Correct. Correct.
And that is incorporating that into a VFX scenario.
Correct.
Is basically the interaction between different departments, direction and writing and actor and all that coming into that.
Correct.
This is something which we will talk again. That is an aspect which I constantly feel missing in our filmmaking. And it becomes very one-way track and single-way track and things like that.
Yeah.
So finally, when you see it together, you realize, shit, we should have done that. That's an issue which is generally in our filmmaking.
Sure.
But anyway, so this is exactly what I have written it here as like idea, script to screen kind of a thing. This is where so when people were writing, so where you used to get a script copy of the script or a scene or or somebody would just narrate it to you.
So the initial films which I did, I never got a script. I don't think many of them had a script. So the initial, but I used to get the scene or either get it, narrate. Then we used to make a storyboard. Then of course, based on the storyboard, the writing used to change, and there was a bit of an to and fro happened. But at the later stage, then I used to insist that I want to know the story because I refuse to work on a film where I don't know the overall picture, because I always believe that my shot, what I'm positing or taking the thing is telling a tiny bit of the story. If I don't know the whole story, what do I incorporate in that tiny bit? So I always made sure that I knew the script. I heard, most of the time I heard it from the director reading, or I had a copy of it.
How did Jajantaram Mamantaram happen? Because I think that was one of the very different film which happened that time. I am still surprised how anybody dared to put money into that film.
Yeah. I think none of us knew what we were getting.
Yeah, that's a very, very correct explanation.
If we had any idea of what we were getting into, we wouldn't have done it. Yeah. Samudra came up with this idea, and he had a producer, and that's the time, a lot of films were being made. Visual effects was going good for us. That's how you got involved. We had 700 plus shots in that film. Visual effects shots.
Yeah, the whole length of the film actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe more, I think. I can't remember more. And a lot of contacts.
This is 2000.
It is 2000, early 2000. And again, resources are absolutely zero. For example, when we started the film, 20 GB is the largest hard drive what we had. I think towards the end, we got 40 GB came into the market. I think probably we were the largest consumer of other hard disks of 40 GB. And we couldn't afford a backup copy. And at that point in time, we had around 30 or 35 computers in the studio. And even if we put 4 hard drives, because 4 hard drives are the maximum we could put in all the workstations put together, we won't be able to store all the data for sure.
So what, you were shooting on film?
We were shooting on the film, then we had a film scanner. We used to scan that one and then store it on a hard drive.
35 mm.
35 we store it on a hard drive, composite it, put it back onto another hard drive, take it to the we had a recorder, film recorder, record it, lab, all the whole process. Nightmare it was.
So once you shoot after a month, you will get to see what you shot.
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe a little later, because by the time we would have got, because you edit it, you edit it, and then those shots are worked on. It was an absolute nightmare in a way. The sheer logistics of handling so much of data and shots, and yet it had to work as a film, as a story. It took a little effort.
And you keep coming up with shots. We could do this way, could do that way.
Huh.
But there was no storyboard, probably. You had?
We had a storyboard. Not. I wouldn't say all of it. But we roughly knew what we were going to.
You had a VFX storyboard, like in terms of layers and stuff like that?
I mean, the whole film was VFX. So
4 different storyboards.
So we had developed actually a system by which because we never scaled the character down on digitally. It was shot of that size by moving the camera in the same axis 6 times. Because I wasn't very comfortable in scaling it down digitally. Even though scaling up is a problem, scaling down also I didn't want to. So out of the 700, I don't think we even had one shot with the perspective problem. And the light and perspective were bang on.
So how did you manage the light perspective?
No, we had kept a complete track of the direction of the light. And during for example, on a beach, when we were shooting, we kept changing the direction of the screen and the camera relatively to the sunlight. So we had a direction of the shadow falling and the way to measure the shadow direction. So that is, but what is more important was also, I mean, it's equally important to get the light in the same direction, to have the same angle of the camera. Yeah. So there's no instrument which you can measure the angle of the camera to the last denomination of angle. So we used one day I remember then we were struggling to figure out, before we went on location, how to kind of come up with such a thing. And that time the studio was being built and it was getting late. So I had to come to the studio and just literally, pick brick and just keep it and say, okay, now do it. So I saw one of the masons using a water pipe to level it.
Okay. Very
that
ancient
kind of
method.
clicked.
Ancient
Ancient method.
Yeah.
Water level. So it never went wrong. So then, based on that one, using a water pipe, we built a system by which you could always point the camera in the same direction and farther the subject, accurate the angle was.
I remember you telling me about the London story where the cricket ground.
In Lords. Yeah, I mean, they were laughing they were wondering what was this water pipe doing. But I can't, even today, I would rely on that water pipe technique.
And finally, Lord's Stadium was, how many feet different? And I'm saying they didn't know that stadium had a slope.
No. I mean, many times that's how, because when you look at the ground, if the ground is large, we can never figure out the gradient. And I was amazed, many times it was like 6 feet to 11 feet gradient happens across, let's say.
You wouldn't realize it.
We wouldn't realize 20 feet. So gradient is something which is very...
and it is the water pipe which figured out.
Which will figure out all of this. And it really worked very well.
But then Jajantaram actually was a success commercially.
Commercially, I'm not sure whether in theatre it ran because there are some issues in release, I believe. There's some wrong timing or whatever.
Okay.
But it ran on television for a very long time. I remember some time back somebody had posted on the internet saying that in 20 years back we had a film called Jajantaram Mamantaram, which was better than one of those current films or whatever they did that. But then I realized that a couple of generations actually grew up on that.
Yeah. I know that. My kid tells me. I still remember visuals from there. I'm saying as a project it was successful. Apart from the commercial activity of it, you could finish it, you could release it, and it was convincing in that sense. But nobody ever dared to do another one.
Yeah. Visual effects films came, but again, I think the whole visual effects industry took a different turn, I believe. And again, like what you were mentioning, in Jajantaram Mamantaram, all of us were fully involved. All of us know that filmmaking is a highly collaborative process. I think Jajantaram Mamantaram was a highly collaborative project. Maybe because the visual effects involved.
And people are doing it for the first time, so all you guys were equally involved in that because you all wanted to see what's happening.
And there was no other way to do that film. So everything opened up. Which created space for everybody to contribute. I think all the department, Panda, the cinematographer, to Yogendra Panda, to Samintro, to the writer, the music director, all of us were involved, and somehow all of us could connect as individuals also.
Yeah, I mean the whole idea of let's make it in Hindi, Gulliver's Travel was like something.
I don't think Samintro realized, neither did I realize what we were getting into.
Yeah.
But it worked. At some point it worked.
Right. Now I'm saying that track, even a film is successfully completed and reached screen, that means it's considered as a successful venture, whether it made money or not. That thing is considered as a successful venture. But nobody decided, okay, let's make another one. Normally these kind of things, people get into that again. But for some reason, we never made VFX-oriented films or those kind of stories. As an industry, we never touched upon later. Okay.
True, I think...
was there any attempt like that ever?
I mean, recently there are many films which were based on visual effects.
Which is very recent.
Very recent.
I'm saying the last 20 years,
Yeah, no, there wasn't... I don't know why it never happened again. It's also kind of...
So I'm trying to figure that out. See, when I go back to history of filmmaking in India, there was a time cameras were manufactured in Kolhapur. So we were very much into that. That's the beginning of filmmaking in the world, basically. So people used to come from abroad and make films here, and technicians came from abroad. Beautiful films were made those days. If you see the 40s, early 40s films, they were very well shot and all that. And we had attempts to make all these kind of things. Making a studio in Prabha Studio was underwater, system, and all that were created. Slowly, these things started faded away, and we don't have any of this thing. When I was doing a research on history of cinematography in India, I could find publications which talked about around 4 pages of the technical achievements a film did on that particular film, So today we don't even talk about those things, It kind of limited very much into, I don't know what it is limited to. We do not talk about the art of filmmaking anymore. We only talk about some element of it, and became very superficial.
Very true. When you ask a question about why it did not happen, so that if I have to think back and say, okay, why Jajantaram Mamantaram happened, because Jajantaram Mamantaram as a film had to be made. So we figured out how to make it. At a later point in time, I think most of the visual effects was looked as Hollywood visual effects. Visual effects means that. Flying saucers and, outer space and things like that. So, for some good reason, there was no other film which came, say that this is something what we want to tell a story as it is, and can we do it or no. But otherwise, visual effects was always looked at as Hollywood effects.
So the definition of visual effects changed. Because Hollywood has been, before visual effects also, if I look at some of the stuff of the early Hollywood films, they always figured out ways to do certain things. If somebody is climbing a 30-story building, they would put a flat on the ground, they'll have a structure made and people would be crawling on that. It will look like he's climbing with fans and all that, like in black and white period, So that was there was an attempt. Even look at Charlie Chaplin films, when Chaplin is skating around that on the brink. For many years I wondered how he did that, Yeah, until one day somebody explained it to me, the perspective work on a glass, which is done in front of that pit is not there at all, like when he's doing it. So this kind of an attempt of using technology for storytelling purpose, in a very effective way. I'm not talking about technology for technology, But for a very emotional storytelling way, this was incorporated in our filmmaking at some point. Somewhere India actually didn't work on that level at all.
Multiple reasons, Murali. One is, mm, coming back to Jajantaram Mamantaram, as I said, no, it had to be made, so is there a way to do it? Hmm? And if the need is to make that one, we figured out ways to do it. Because everybody, all of us actually were wanting to make that film. So I remember, somebody was trying to, there's this laser technology to kind of orient the camera and stuff. But we didn't have money to buy any of that one. So we didn't even think of doing that one. Then water pipe is something which we could afford, so we did that one. So one is that wanting to do or wanting to tell a story, and how can we tell this story, and what is the resource what we have, can we do it? Most of the time, or no was not a question. We want to tell this story. Can we do it? Is no. We have to tell this story.
The over dependability on devices was not there.
Correct.
So I mean, if pyramid could be made, I don't know how many thousand years back, you have ways of doing it always.
Correct.
It's just that we don't.
And that kind of a need and a collaboration, I don't think it happened for quite some time. But then it's the later film was like more of, okay, I have this particular scene, so how can we do it? So
Yeah, that, I mean, even today I would say VFX is being used as a correction tool, not as a creative tool at all.
Absolutely.
Let's remove the wire there. Let's extend this.
Yeah,
Let's do that. I mean, we don't have. I was reading about a Hollywood production house, and what they do is like, I mean, once a script is approved technically that this is a film which we can make, what they do is like they start budgeting for the film. So there are various parameters they depend on to budget the film. It's very interesting. So one was this: they send that script to a VFX producer and read it, and you tell me how you could help me to tell this story. So they come back with probably 20, 50 things. Like these are the areas where we can step in and make it better than what is written there. Now they'll get a budget for that, and they'll say, this much money we don't have, so let's scale it down. So this is a process of what is important, what could be used to tell a story. This aspect is not there with us at all, or like somewhere, I mean, is it because our VFX production houses are not inclined to do some kind of work, or this never happens?
it's a mix of many things, Murali. One is, when you said a VFX producer, we don't have that kind of a producers currently. I mean, there might be, I'm not telling that absolutely no, but as a profession, there are very few people who actually kind of take a script and sit and say, okay, fine, this would cost you this much, and this. But there are people who can cost it now, but that they are purely commercial people. So here we are talking about somebody who can understand the story and say, look, listen, we don't need this for this story, and go back and ask the director or the writer, can we have this instead? And many of them would just say, no, listen, this is what it is. If you can't do it, just let me know. Tell me that you can't do it. Don't tell me suggestions. Primarily because the suggestions might also be like really out of place suggestions. So we should know how to suggest something. So for that matter, to do that, and we should know the story. We should know the way the director wants to tell the story. We should be a part of the director's mind at that point in time. So somehow, unfortunately, we don't have many people. There are, I mean, I'm not telling absolutely no, but the number of people required in the industry is less. That's one of the main points. And again, for that person to kind of do the costing, you're also talking about multiple things. Understanding whether can we do it on, physically, can we do it? Do we have simulation guys to be done? How can it be simulated? Often something what I face is most of the visual effects artists have no idea of scale. Suppose if you ask what's the dimension of this room, they don't know. It is a small room, big room, medium room. That's the understanding. So those aspects of visual effects we still don't have. There are some people, but some people are not enough to create.
Correct. But at the same time, I think the most important issue which we have, this all will come by and by for me. This kind of the lack of certain knowledge or certain skill training will happen if there is a necessity for that for me. So where does that necessity come from? Necessity has to come from the higher up in your imagination of making a film from onwards. So this has to happen from the scripting period onwards, like maybe. We have, or everywhere, that would be the thing, like, I mean, if you have been making film in a particular way, a particular kind of stories, people follow that only. Because it's very difficult to diverge and, go into something else. So, but how do we educate filmmakers that VFX could be a part of your story, not knowing, seeing that? Because many a times when I watch the making of a Hollywood film, I hadn't looked at it as a VFX portion at all. I mean, like, for example, what was that film? What is this film where this guy who has got only one leg, he's sitting on a boat facing inside, and he jumps to the other side. He's facing outside. He's going to commit suicide, the story finally. So he's sitting there. So now what he does is, one leg is like this, and one leg stump. Okay. So he just put one leg over it, and the other leg goes like that, exactly. Now, it's a very convincing thing that he has got only one leg. And obviously, it's a very famous actor. He had both the legs when he was shooting that. So I was wondering, like, how did he do it? And the way he did it, when I went into the making of it and to figure out, like, what they did, then I realized, like, it's a very simple thing of, like, they cut the bar of the railing and, then this went like that and this much was touched up. This is all. I will never look at it as a VFX element at all when I'm watching the film. But they took that pain to put that for two things. One is that the believability of the character, that like he is like that. So this aspect is completely ignored in our filmmaking, basically. If you're doing VFX, then it should be seen as a marketing tool or, something which needs to be marketed as a VFX. Otherwise, we don't do VFX. It's like in one of the regional films we were working, the beginning of the film, there was certain things, when the characters were kids. So I said, let's get it's a period thing, around 60s or something. So I said, let's get this kind of a van where they're traveling and all that. So nothing was happening. Like after 3 days, I said, like, what happened? Like we were supposed to get a design for that. And this producer sat with me and he said, like, we are not putting money on that. I said, it's period, like it should be like that. He said, no, if there is no hero, then we are not putting money into that. We put money only into hero scenes. Anything which is peripheral to that, very minimal shooting budget, that's all. There is no other idea. So this is the way we look at film even today. So this is somewhere we need to educate the filmmaking community to look at VFX as a tool where you can strengthen your storytelling, the example which I said earlier, which is something which we need to integrate in thinking of it.
I think, Murali, to educate this one, the quickest way I've realized is actually, if one film becomes good, in all the aspects what we're talking, including the visual effects, everything works out very well. And if that commercially it becomes, then there's one bunch of people who would want to make such films, but there's another bunch who would say, okay, listen, how did that film happen? Probably that is the quickest way, I think, can be, you can educate the filmmakers.
The economics has to work out, then people will follow that.
It will follow that one. That's probably the quickest way. And of course, as colleagues and friends and all work, that's which has happened in Jajantaram Mamantaram. There are some other projects also. There is art installations, what I do. There it works like that. So with group of people, it start with something, we'll end up somewhere else. But all the 4 or 5 of us are working, we contribute.
Again, the awareness of each department, everybody. Understanding what is happening is the most important thing. In filmmaking, most of the time the upper layers don't have what you do, don't know what you're doing. It's not, they're not involved probably, or they don't think it is worth knowing that the aspect of it.
Yeah,
that is probably the reason. Like I mean, when I keep talking about when I go to film schools to take lectures and all that, I tell them like we still have film schools which teach for subjects. Cinematography, sound editing, and direction. That's all. I said, there are millions of posts available waiting in the film industry. We need people, to get into that. Or even otherwise from conventional filmmaking itself. Like, I mean, there is no place to teach action to anybody. I know action directors who have no idea about physics and, angle of where the rope should come from, So it's so we don't have training facilities in a very systematic way, in a scientific way of training facilities. We don't have in any filmmaking. VFX is one of them probably. I'm coming to that later. India VFX scenario now handles a lot of outsourced material, basically. From any big film you mention, they all have Indian companies, at least 10 companies working for them in India. What is the difference between, since we make so much here, why we are nowhere at par with the Hollywood film?
All right, so I think only this Hollywood thing, if you go to Hollywood, geographically, it is there in LA. If you go there, you're talking about a bunch of people who come from various parts of the world, extremely talented, physically present. There'll always be one Hollywood somewhere. It so happens that now it is in LA. For a brief period of time, Peter Jackson managed to do that in Australia and New Zealand. A lot of talented guys went over to Beta Digital and worked. So there was a mini Hollywood which was made there, and they made excellent stuff. In India, to my knowledge, a lot of outsourced work, as you mentioned. I'm not looking down on Pandan, but something which it is produced. It is produced. You can definitely say their shots are created, but it is more of a production company rather than factory than the creative aspect which is happening. The creative calls are mostly done there. Yes, there are some creative calls which are being made here as well. It's not just completely black and white. There are gray areas. But over a period of time, I think we might do the creative work. But I have a feeling that if you ask me the question, when will we become like Hollywood? We'll never be, because there will be always 10 steps ahead. Because the kind of people that place can attract for various reasons. Because there are brilliant filmmakers getting attracted there, brilliant films are being made there, the large budgets are there, so you can experiment things with that one. So, for example, if somebody has to sit and make a rig for 3 months, who's going to bear the cost of his expenses? So there is somebody to support that one. So then he makes the rig, like what you mentioned in Kolhapur, when the cameras are being made, there's somebody or somehow those things could be made. Even today, if I were to just go and get something which is milled, it's a job. It is, a lot of the people say, listen, one piece, we are not interested in doing this milling. So we'll have to go and beg and plead, even if you're willing to pay money. So the whole ecosystem is there. So, we don't have that kind of an ecosystem here. As well as technology.
We never developed that ecosystem.
We never developed that ecosystem.
That's the basic reason behind it.
Yeah.
Because I was in an engineering college where I had gone for some work. So I was talking to them, and I was saying that the higher education never got into filmmaking in India. Whether it is MBAs and that kind of business education. I don't find MBAs working in, or even if there are MBAs, they are not from the institutes which are considered important. The engineering colleges do not contribute anything to the thing. We still work with borrowed track and trolley or stolen or borrowed technology. We still work with that. Very simple things like a track and trolley to a light mechanism to complicated cameras. We do not manufacture any of that. We don't even attempt to do that. I don't see people from engineering colleges coming into film sets to do any kind of internship or anything like that. So we somewhere the upper education never got into filmmaking, whereas that's not the case abroad. Especially in Hollywood and all that, there are companies which create things for them. So this was on demand. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. So when you say the brilliant people are associated with a Hollywood setup, it is not because we don't have that brilliance here. We have that brilliance, but for some reason, we don't attract them into our industry. Or industry is not supposed to be something which they should spend their time on.
So, a lot of things are involved in what you mentioned, Murli, starting from education. which to my mind, education is what builds a culture. Let's take engineering education. Do you think the engineering graduates are engineers? No. Hmm? The word engineer, I think comes from a Greek word, I believe, Greek or Latin. It says that the original word is engineer. Somebody who comes up with ingenious solution to a problem is called an engineer. Then when it came to English, it became engineer. It goes on to our education system, which, where we don't go to acquire knowledge, we go to get a degree so that we can
some job,
and we can get on with our life.
Job oriented. Or education is
completely job oriented one. So, and yes, a lot of people are getting educated, so to say, and a lot of people are getting jobs. We are doing back-end job. So back-end job in software and all that is happening. But we don't have many people in the film industry at all. As you mentioned, the higher education, who will go for higher education? Visual effects. Because the people don't see it as a career option.
No, I'm not talking about visual effects as such. I'm saying there's so many things. When you're talking about, I need to make something. For example, we were doing
engineering.
Yeah, I need engineers on my set. Okay, I need a company, an engineering company whom I can call up and say, this is what I want.
Not available.
It's not there.
Not available.
So we were shooting a lift commercial. For some commercial, there was a lift scene. So the scene is like there is this guy and the girl, husband and wife fight is the concept. So this girl gets inside the lift and she presses all the numbers, till the 49th floor, and she gets up there and the lift will take a long time for it to come back. So this was the concept. Now the numbers, which when she presses 35, the 35 button should
light up.
Now this is happening like there is a guy sitting outside with a cable with two leads, which is and it doesn't match at all. But you can't even see what she's pressing. So I was wondering, where are we? Why are we so behind in technology or understanding technology to incorporate?
So you were mentioning this, right? In visual effects, this is a core issue. Because most of the time, computer compositing, people think compositing as visual effects. No, there's a humongous amount of math, humongous amount of physics. And a lot of this simulation software, what we use, if you don't have a proper understanding of the real world and convert it into numbers. I remember during the beginning of our conversation, you asked, okay, from the physical, the in-camera effects to the computing world. One of the reason why we are able to do so many things today on a computer is because the computer can only compute. That's why it's called a computer. What can be computed is nothing but numbers. Fortunately, a lot of things, whether it is text, image, sound, timing, everything can be converted into numbers. So they become digits. And the moment it becomes digits, they all can be interact. So you can take some digits from this and multiply it with this from the image, and then something else will happen. So it becomes a common platform where something can trigger something else. So that is why the visual effects has become so much more powerful on a computer platform than the physical world, wherein the fire couldn't interact with something else. Wherein here, when I increase on a simulation software, the amount of fire I can read in numbers, and I can connect it to a sound if I want to, like for in a gaming. So that amount of fire.
The fire itself is numbers.
Numbers. It's completely numbers. So those numbers I can extract and create sound corresponding to that one internally. So why I said this one is because we need a lot of mathematicians, physics guys to work on visual effects. Even in studio, we don't have. Nobody is willing to come into this for some good reason. Maybe they are not pursuing this as a career option, or they have better career option according to them. So this is definitely, we suffer we in the sense visual effects industry suffers the most in this area.
Do we have VFX education in our country?
It is mostly software education.
Software education, not the art of VFX.
Not the art of VFX.
It's not there at all.
No.
The collaboration between different aspects you need, the engineering skill you need to make things. See, this is something which I learned from you and watching you working. It is not just something which happens on a computer in your office. I remember you telling me how the fire would be inside an enclosed space. So to get the fire movement, which will replicate the movement of a railway station, we made a small metallic tube and put the fire into that and shot that. Then he told me to put the camera upside down because the fire has to be going up. I remember that. So, I mean, this is something else. Understanding a particularity of any event which is happening in camera, understanding that, dissecting it into different aspects of it, and shooting it separately, and then again understanding the movement and the different aspects, how it would behave in a particular situation.
Exactly. So
and recreate that. So
correct.
This is a lot of computing in your head. You need to
Exactly, Murali. So when I look at these things, I need to have a number in my mind. For example, the fire. How big is the fire? So is it 3 feet or 30 feet or 300 feet? So because 300 feet fire has a different nature. So you just can't just scale it up in computer and say, look, this is 30 feet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for that, even the dimensions, what is being burnt? For example, a plastic bomb. Why do you call it a plastic bomb? How does it detonate? Is it the heat which is when detonation happens from a plastic bomb, what happens? Will the fire happen or not? If
What
the
is the
fire
color of the fire?
What's color of the fire? And for a plastic bomb, technically there's no fire. There's no fire.
Okay.
The secondary things, which the short circuit happens, some fuel or somewhere, then that's the fire which happens at a later point. But the large destruction happens because of the shock wave. So one has to go into the technical details, understand what it is. And because a viewer, they are very intelligent people, because they might not know these technical details, but they know it looks fake. There's something wrong. And immediately the narrative gets derailed there. So as visual effects supervisors, it's our responsibility to understand that, look, what is explosive, how big is that, what happens inside that one. Then you convert that into numbers in your head, because you'll have to translate that into numbers in computer in some parameter or other. So we got to get trained in that aspect, which is
Just quite. And that's what I'm saying. Even in film schools, we don't have VFX as a paper
as a course.
Nothing. We don't know how to incorporate it.
Yeah.
It's all something else. It's not something. And everybody is fascinated by it. But
now
just
I believe
don't have
IITs are incorporating visual effects as a this thing. I just got a call from one of the IITs asking whether I can conduct that course. But yes, now
that again will be technical.
They are trying to keep it both ways. But yes, abroad, when I was teaching in Singapore, we had a visual effects course wherein both has equal emphasis in terms of the art form as a visual effect as an art form, and the technical emphasis also. Because many schools, either they'll look into one of this. So some schools I know, they just talk about the art part, and those kids coming from there, they just can't do visual effects. It's as useless as the other way around. But you'll have to have a good balance between these two.
So, I mean, this is that education aspect of it, bringing it into our education system. We need to look at what this education, it's a perennial problem from first standard onwards, so I'm not, you can't blame only film education for that. So, this is something which has, people have asked me, like when you go to see a Hollywood film, the end of it, the rolling titles start. Many of these Marvel things, otherwise the moment the title starts, you get up and leave actually. Because of the Marvel technique of like when there is something waiting for you in the end after the titles, you see through the whole title. So you see there's hundreds of people scrolling up, especially on the VFX title, there are hundreds of people. So the only thing which you do is look at Indian names there, like you keep looking at Indian names. But something which I have wondered always, like, what are these guys doing there? You know, there's hundreds of people.
Good question, at least. I mean, because for me, the film what I made, visual effects is a thankless job. Because the moment you know it's done visual effect, the shot is flopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it passes without somebody noticing, then we don't get the credit. So in which way it is a humongous amount of work goes behind it. Only humongous amount of work in varying dimensions. Starting from, as we spoke, the narrative part, to designing shots, to storyboarding them, figuring out the viability of filming that one, to splitting into multiple layers. Sometimes there'll be 7, 8, 10 layers need to be shot on the same frame, to be shot, to compose. The interdependability of these elements. Many a times when, if there is a, let's say for example, if there is a little bit of a fire on this table, if I have to douse the fire with my hand, the action is tapping the fire and the reaction is fire going off. Sometimes you'll have to take the other way around, because we'll have to douse the fire first, because it might not happen in one tap. So we'll douse the fire and count the number of tappings what we have done with a mesh or something, and the timing between this one. Then the actor has to simulate that one later. So 2 layers in this case. How do we shoot? Which layer should be shot first? Whole lot of things we need to be decided. Then, of course, filming it. Then comes back to the composing table. There will be another 100 layers to simulate, animate, light, render, cut masks, to onwards to a whole lot of things, which need a lot of work. So, as you said, many times in large Hollywood films, there will be thousands of people working on these ones. And yeah, I mean, those
All kinds of titles, you know, which
yeah, it is.
I don't know.
It'll be like 3 hours title. It's just
No, I'm saying even the job titles, you know.
yeah. So some of
Forget
the
the names.
crazy titles are there. And
What are the common titles?
the one which
Matte, this thing, and, you
one
know,
which is a
like
compositing, the mask cutting, and the modelers, the riggers, the texturing artists, to animators, to simulation guys, data wranglers, to a whole lot of shots will be there. I mean, titles.
What's a rigger?
Somebody who would kind of, you know, if you have a character to animate, so you have to build the bones for that one, because the mesh is made of a lot of little points. You can't animate every point. So you hold one point and move. It should naturally move like a human arm, or, you know, a character's arm, or a creature arm. So there are technical things to do to make an animator able to animate this character as if they were actors. So that process is called a
So
rigging.
it's a rig being made actually.
Rig being made for
And then
the
you attach the rest of the things onto that rig.
yeah, I mean, based on the character design, you design the skeleton, what you call a skeleton. Then you apply some mathematical thing onto that, and so that it moves the way it has to move. So that it's a specialized job.
There's something which I mentioned earlier, like reading a script to figure out how VFX can help the storytelling. This is a process, as you said, like, I mean, you need people who are trained in that. Okay. So this is like script writing as such, isn't it? Reimagining the script in a different way.
Which is what you do, Murli. I mean, when you read a script, no, you would see the shots in certain ways. You would imagine lenses. And probably at the same time, you would also think of the narrative and alternatives. Okay, this is the emotional aspect which you need in this particular stage of the film. Maybe this scene is not working for you the way you are seeing it, right? So you will go back and talk to
I could enhance it probably. The emotional aspect can be
emotional
enhanced.
aspect can be, you know, maybe too much, too less, whatever, or it's wrong emotion can come in, right? So as visual effects supervisor, visual effects producer, or visual supervisor, I should be able to kind of get into that aspect of it and say, look, listen, okay, here the flying saucer is going to come, or, you know, but is it required? Yeah, I mean, so somebody has to come, so then it is required, but in what form? We have seen hundreds of flying saucers in Hollywood. So is that a thing what we would bring in that emotion, or something else can be done?
What is the grain of our storytelling and
Correct.
character?
Correct. And then, of course, I would go back to the director and say, okay, listen, I think this is my take on it. What do you think? He might agree or he might not agree there. Then if it'll be more interesting for me to know that why is he not agreeing? Because if that's the case, then I've not really understood the film correctly. So I would probe a little further and try to understand the director a little more, such that I can think like him, but with a twist. Or from my point of view as a visual effects supervisor. So that process, yes, I think it's very important. That's a collaborative process which has to happen.
This is enhancing storytelling again, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Whatever the basic element of that particular scene, you are enhancing that emotional aspect of it so that it reaches the audience in a better way.
Correct.
That should be the approach, basically.
Correct. I mean, of course, the director has a larger vision, but I think...
That's where I was talking about the whole script and whether you get to read and all that, you know, because the collaborative process needs to be everybody understands the same thing, then only a collaborative process work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, each horse would be going in different directions.
Absolutely. So I always insisted that I need to read this one, or if he can't hand it over the script to me, but I need to listen from somebody who read.
Okay. I'm going to read out something to you.
Sure.
I will not be exaggerating when I say that in the traditional visual effects production pipeline, around 70% of the time we are immersed in fixing the film source material, which is far from the ideal, and trying to integrate it with multiple layers. For example, a cinematographer considers several elements to compose a frame and has the creative freedom to improvise in a given context. But when all of the constituting elements are replaced by a green screen and actors, you are left with nothing to compose for the shot, often reducing the job to a mere mechanical activity. The same would be the case with all other creative stakeholders, including the actors, directors, choreographers. Later, when we try and composite the image, we discover that things are off. There is an insane amount of disconnect, followed by a gradual dampening of creativity and excitement that reflects on the shots, and by then it's too late. The shot that was supposed to be done in 20 hours has now taken 80, and yet it culminates into just an okay shot in which most of the problems are somehow hidden. As we approach the unbending factor called the release date, a release of collaborative compromises are made. By then, the post house is planning for bankruptcy, producer is livid, the VFX artists are burnt out, personal lives are in disarray.
So
this was a statement you made some time back.
Yeah, because it's something which I go through many a time.
Correct. Let me pull out one line from it to elaborate. In the traditional visual effects production pipeline, around 70% of the time, we are immersed in fixing the filmed source material. What is that?
So, really, when we have shot together, if it's a non-green screen thing, so I would come and ask, Murali, can I get a little bit of space on the left side so that the blast, when it happened, the debris can come here? So you'll say, okay, so you want this one here? Okay, fine. Let me just pan a little towards the right or left. Then suddenly you'll realize that the other part of the frame is empty. So you will ask the art department to fill in something there. Okay, so the director is also there. Then the actor comes and says, okay, so we'll say, okay, fine, listen, you are coming from here and then this debris is coming from here, da 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 da. So then he's like, okay, so where do I jump in from? So the action director says, okay, fine, I'll put the cable here. Just move the cable here so that he can jump. The whole frame is adjusted there. So for that shot...
And each one has different image in their mind.
Each one, but correct, is there. So traditionally, you would have framed it another way. So, because I come in and request that, like, listen, I need a space here so that blast elements I can bring in here. So you pan the frame. When you pan the frame, your composition went out. So you wanted to compose that frame. So you asked the art director to put in something there. And the actor had to jump from some place. So the action director came in place. The actor decided his timing, the way, because he also has the rhythm to jump and do it. He has a job to do, right? And the director says, okay, it will work for him. You see the collaboration in all this one. So in a green screen shoot, what will you compose? So this is called as green screen fatigue. In visual effects, it's called green screen fatigue.
Yeah. And a lot of mistakes, because how far you imagine something.
How far you will imagine, and how far will... See, because I consider, for that particular shot, I consider myself as director there. Because I have the responsibility of delivering that shot like the director has. So now how do I get everybody involved in that shot? How do I get everybody involved? How do I ask you to compose? I can sit and say, look, sketch and show, all that will happen. So you will do your best. But there's a limitation, no? Because I've seen you composing with lights. Here, there's a shaft of light coming. So that's a strong visual element which you compose, which is going to come at the end of it, no? Because by the end, there is a 200 compositors which are equivalent to 200 cinematographers. So they compose the frame.
Each one changes.
Each one changes. So this is a perennial problem. And the actor will look at me and say, okay, from here to here I jump. There's nothing to emote to. That's
an issue, because you are not... You expect so many other things to be involved in your work, whether it is acting or cinematography or anything. Those elements are missing. So there is nobody is responding to your calls.
Right.
So let me pull out another line, actually the last line. As we approach the unbending factor called the release date, a series of collaborative compromises are made. By then, the post house is planning for bankruptcy, producer is livid, the VFX artists are burnt out, personal lives are in disarray.
These are experiences.
I mean, this is something which I have gone through. Every film which has got VFX.
Yeah.
Every film which I have done. Yeah. So I, after a point, I would tell the director, producer, like, do the VFX elements first. Start your shoot with that so that there is enough time. And it never happens. It's always pushed to the last. And then you have no time. And your stuff hasn't come. It has gone to 10 different houses. And it's not...
it's a mess. It becomes a mess.
It's a terrible mess. Every time it's a terrible mess. And somewhere I believe our filmmaking discipline is the main reason for this happening. We don't have a filmmaking discipline in terms of or we don't respect a lot of the elements which is happening within the filmmaking to give it enough space for them to work and things like that. This is what I like. I mean, even expectations. This is something which I talk about a lot of things, whether it's in action or, in VFX also. Sometime back, I was shooting a scene outside Bombay. So a huge crowd. So we had a storyboard and everything is there. So as per the storyboard, you plan something. So when I started framing, I realized this is not the storyboard frame. Because the thing was the actors were being held up. Because it was evening, so we had another hour to pack up. But so I am just standing there and thinking how are you going to compose this? Then I realized we don't need the actors, because nobody will look at the actors. This is going to be far away. This is going to be an 80mm lens, and which is going to be around at least 40 feet away from the characters. You will not be able to make out who is standing there, because that is the perspective, which is where you need to see another 50,000 people behind, which will be double-doored, replicated or whatever, So once you frame that, this will happen. Now what happens with me is I frame with what I have and a little bit of space there for the extra to be done. This is not the final frame, which is there in the storyboard. So I said, this can't be done. This is not the way. I can't shoot it. I made that frame on a tripod, started off, and then finally it was on a Jimmy and full height of Jimmy to compose. So then I said, this is not the way we can do. We are making mistakes. You reach back Bombay and you start compositing, and you will realize none of this is as per your storyboard, which has happened. So how do you do that? So I said, get those people down. So we got the entire VFX team down, gave them a caravan, put that entire setup inside that. And now I said, let's sit with that, see the frame. And I told them, now you decide what should be my plates within that. So we figured out different plates within that. So the first shot is only this 2-3 things in the frame, because and this is the angle. Otherwise, we would never compose that plate like that. The composition of the plate is something which has to come from the original plate, which doesn't happen without that exercise.
So this is what I was telling when we were talking about a number of people working. No? There's somebody who would like to work backwards to split it into layers. So then what is being shot at that point in time is layers. So as a cinematographer, you would have an idea. You should have an idea. It's my responsibility to actually show you the final frame and say, look, we are doing this one, and of which we need 6 layers, and we're going to shoot 3rd layer now, 1st layer later, and so you definitely know. Then you will compose the frames accordingly.
But the traditional composition knowledge I have cannot be applied,
It cannot be, because what you're saying is not what is going to come. Now, how will you compose it? It's a crime to ask you to compose a thing.
So we had printouts now of the frame. Different plates were different printouts with everything marked on it. This is the length, this is the height, this is the focal length. Everything was marked, and it was given to us in the morning from that caravan. We will go and shoot it.
Elements, absolutely.
It's such a technically disciplined way of doing it.
Correct.
Which we don't have in the industry in general, I'm saying.
I mean, there are few, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah, it's not sufficient. We need to get it in our grain. Which is
it has to come in a culture.
Yeah.
Actually.
And the last portion of, I'm not asking you about the collaborative compromises, because that is, you have any story?
We'll need 2-3 episodes for that.
So, okay, the post house is planning for bankruptcy. This is something I have always wondered. So many Hollywood, VFX houses went bankrupt and sold out, and bought by a lot of people.
If you look at the financial listing of a post house, the largest outflow is salary, which is usually now in Bombay or in India, they are all on a monthly pay. So when you don't have work, you'll still have to pay. The softwares are on yearly subscription. You have to pay. The only thing you can cut down is tea and coffee for
Idli.
Say that next week don't come to the office. We'll give you the salary. Then it saves a little bit of air conditioning, and electricity can be saved. But otherwise, there is a constant outflow. So the profit what you make, let's say 20% profit what you make out of a film, which means that you can only afford 20% bench time, which is never the case, because between 2 projects there will be a lot of bench time. So you can't afford to do that one. So as a result, you'll start, okay, let's take that project, let's take this project. And then you start undercoating, because there are multiple studios in this thing. So why it is better to get that job, because otherwise there is no income for next 1 month. Let's cut the losses, and eventually you have to cut the studio.
Is it the case with the smaller VFX houses, or it's there with bigger houses also?
Both. Bigger houses might take a little while to kind of collapse. The smaller houses would collapse sooner, because they might not have deeper pockets or sustenance capabilities or funding enough to.
So it's like airline.
It's like airline. At least you can save the fuel if you don't fly.
But till somebody explained airline business to me, I thought what's wrong with them?
Yeah, it is. To park the plane, you need money.
That's right. Every moment, the moment you start a business here.
Yeah.
So VFX thing is basically, it is that, it's not something, because I remember production manager telling you, you got the computer.
Computer sab kharid kar rehta hai, so why do you need money?
Why do you need Yeah. So you have already invested in all that, so why do you need money? So that upgradation is also expensive, not just the hardware, but even.
So now I think most of upgradation, when I say if it's just hardware and software, I think probably all the software is on a yearly subscription model, and you have to spend every year the money to subscribe to that particular software, without which you can't do. Yes, there are some open source pieces of software, A lot of studios are actually kind of migrating to it. But yes, you have to. But the biggest upgradation is your knowledge. You have to. This is like a treadmill. If you don't keep on running, you will be out of the scene in no time. In no time. It is just, there are some days where I think, okay, I've learned something. And by the time you wake up,
But this is about the competitiveness of the industry, or like
because it is constantly evolving.
that's there. But I'm saying, in a financial way, whatever you have put in, you should get it back, no, within that period.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think the model which is sustainable right now is actually the back-end model, which is that's the reason large studios, they have a back-end work which is happening, because then it's a constant supply of work which is coming in.
The next line was producer is livid. I understand now. Like every film actually the last around 7-8 years probably. By the time I reach grading, I would tell the director, "Can we push it? Because we are in no shape to release. The stuff hasn't come in. The VFX stuff, whatever has come in, is not something which can be put on a screen. So let's push." And he'll just stare at me and say, like, "No, we can't, because it's a chariot, you can't stop it. So there is no way you can do that." So I understand these problems, but I'm just trying to put it across. VFX artists are burnt out, which is overworking. These reiterations which keep happening back and forth. Is it because of a lack of communication between the VFX team and the direction department, or things like that, or is it because
It's partly to blame the VFX artists also. Lack of knowledge. So something to do. A lot of VFX artists would like to work really hard. They're not able to work smart.
Isn't it a pipeline issue? Because why you were saying that, we have this tendency that, okay, we hire an action director and he will design the action. In fact, he's a coordinator.
Correct.
We assume that he will design the action in a different way. That's why we have been seeing actions in the last 25 years. The same thing keeps getting repeated. The same thing which happens with VFX also. You hire a VFX supervisor and we think he's an artist also. He will imagine this also, that also, things like that. So the in-between liaison people probably, who should be designing the aspect, we don't have that. And we haven't put that into our pipeline at all. Like having this thing from the very beginning, design it. This is something which I have been proposing for a film which I'm supposed to do. I said, let's have a design guy, with us on a payroll, a monthly thing. So everything which we are saying, let him come up with designs. So you can go through 100 designs and approve one. And it's the design which will go to the VFX department on a 3D design, go to the VFX. So they are not, troubled with the aspect of design. So you are not struggling with correcting the design in the end. You're only correcting with the execution aspect of it. So this is something which I have been wondering why people don't do it.
So the studio what I was running, or actually my studio earlier, there were around 22 people. 6 of them were from NID. So 1/3 were designers, artists essentially. So a lot of work which was done even before we go on location was done by these people. Then everybody would sit together and say, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. Compositors know what is going to be expected. It is my job to kind of make sure that they get what they need to get, and liaison between stunt coordinator, director to cinematographer, everybody else. But the initial thing was done by the designers, by artists who would know, and they knew what film was. Because I used to make sure that they all watch films continuously. So and of course they had the fundamental training in films. And that's the only way we could come up with shots which would go unnoticed in the film.
But that's an overkill in the sense, like, you guys taking over that aspect of it. there should be one person doing that in complete contact with the director and whoever is the designing aspect.
But there's nobody.
There's nobody. That's what I'm
Nobody
saying.
there.
This
We
is
had to fill in. We had to fill in
So
there.
that is
Because that had to be done. Someone had to
somebody has to be doing it.
bell the cat.
Yeah, because I have faced this every time. Like, I mean, I have lit up a space with a huge space. I mean, 180 feet long and some 120 feet with filled with people. So that space, now how to light up was an issue. Like, I mean, it's the court of a palace. So I had lights, put up on one side, like huge platforms on the side, and I had very heavy duty lights punched into that thing. So now, my mind, these old structures have got this kind of balconies on the side. It's something like that I'm looking at. Now, finally, when the thing came back, because there was a shaft of light coming, like they added another shaft of light from here. I said, there can't be two suns, you can, how can you have a light from there? And the whole thing which came was something like a hole on the side, So then I had to sit through Google to find those similar attics and balconies pictures and send it to them and correct it. And these are all happening a week before the release. Okay. Now, this aspect should have been done when we were shooting that.
So, when you mentioned this thing in the beginning, we asked, I think a lot of blame we have to take it as visual effects people, because we should have been clear that, okay, what you had.
This should be the design.
This should be the design, right? And we should have had the knowledge that there are no two suns.
Yeah.
And the shaft of the light.
Yeah, that is fine. But I'm saying still, when your catwalk is removed and you have put a structure there now, your ceiling and the roof and all that. When you do that, they don't have any idea like what a Maharashtrian roof structure is. They're not going to follow that.
Exactly,
research.
Murali, because they don't have. When you say we, I'm talking about visual effects guys. And as visual effects guys, we should be knowing these things. Okay? If you don't know this one, there will be two shafts. They will come to you, then I have to redo all the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, and this extends to many other aspects. When a blast, why the blasts are looking bad? Because we have no clue about blasts.
As you said, plastic, how does plastic explosive?
Explosions. Flame. What is flame? What is flame? Okay. Why would it emit light?
The chemistry of it.
Chemistry of it. No? So, what is the color temperature of a blast? How much how much can it light up?
Correct.
What is the exposure when you shoot? No, you would know. Okay, fine. There's a blast going to happen, so you will set it for the blast exposure.
Yeah, when it's not there, what do you do?
So then you have one exposure for the rest of it, and when the blast comes, its exposure is different. So you have to know this.
You light up as it is, to see the actor. If it is a real blast, that would have gone sell out.
Correct. Exactly. So these things, these mistakes, you'll have to correct it. That is why people work 3 times over. And that is why this burnout happens. So it is just not one factor. It's multiple factors. At the end of the day, you have personal relationship problems to burn out to everything.
That's what I was coming to. Personal lives. I know people sleeping in the studios for days and days.
Yeah.
Not going home.
Yeah, I've stayed back in studio for 12 continuous nights.
My God. Working. Almost 24 hours.
Almost 24 hours. In between, you just get to sit on a chair and sleep. And it's just not working normally. It's also a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Because...
and it's not your quality of work is going to be any better by doing that.
No. So I remember once when I was similar, 7-8 night outs, and I printed exposed the negative, and coming to the ad labs, the old ad labs at Andheri. So that time the flyover wasn't there. There were 3 signals are there. The second signal, you have to take a right turn to get into the ad labs. And that signal, I was driving, I was carrying the can. It used to take a little while so I fell on the steering and slept off. So somebody came and banged at the window, then I woke up. So then I drove into Ad Labs. The producer was waiting with the what do you call, the distributors standing around. They are all waiting for me to get the can. And I remember going to the canteen, Shetty. There was a guy called Shetty who used to run the canteen. I asked for a chai. This was around, say, 2:30 in the afternoon. Then Shetty woke me up because he was closing the shop. It was around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. From 2:30, I was sleeping on the desk. He said, you should have just, he said, I tried 2-3 times.
He understood you. He has seen so many like you.
So, I mean, yeah, this is
Like, it hasn't changed.
it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed.
Ad Labs went from there to Film City.
And I would say it was I mean, my problem that I suffered that one. Last moment they added one sequence. And this is like 2 weeks before the release. And we were filming exactly 10 days before the release. I should have put my foot down and said no, which I did not do. So I suffer. Simple as that.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is again, I'm saying the accountability factor is what I keep saying. Like, you know, our film industry runs on blame business, not on accountability business. So if there is accountability on every aspect of it, then you can say, no, it cannot be done. Here you don't say that. You know?
Correct.
That's right. Anyway, that's a different topic altogether to come to. So that's something which we mentioned earlier. Like, I mean, I was saying filmmakers try to hide VFX achievements. You know,
Hide.
You know, generally, because I remember a press conference happening. So just before the release of the film, so I was told before that, please don't tell the press that the animal is not real. I said, how can the hero fight with that animal? You know, like, it's impossible to do that. Yeah, but don't tell them that it's real. It's created very well. It's a VFX animal, but they don't want to say that. This is something in comparison. I keep comparing Hollywood to this because that's the best comparison which we can get. You see making of the film or even in advertisement and before teasers and all, you see the kind of VFX work which has gone, some elements, you know, they keep talking about it. Even after the film release, there are platforms where they could talk about it, discuss about it, you know, they come out with it saying that this is how we did it. We hide it. We completely say, no, that was all really happened.
And people know it.
People know it. People obviously know it today. They're not fools. So
I mean, that actually, it is there is a Pandora's box there to be opened. Not just the technical aspect of that animal. I think the producer thinks that it looks real, but but the people know.
Oh, that was a big issue. Like, I mean, whenever there is this kind of things happen, I tell them to not hide it from the public, hide it in the visual, you know, like don't have it so, you know, popping, you know, that's why the issue is like, I mean, this aspect of interconnectivity, relatability of a VFX element in a frame or in a film structure is something which I find extremely disappointing in a lot of the films, because I'm watching a film where the superhero lands is running, you know. So the first leap was small, the second leap he landed on rock and the rock cracked open, you know. From there, the third leap, he has crossed the land and he is landing onto the ocean. Now, he can't go into the ocean, so there is a ship. He steps on the ships and takes the fourth leap and cross the canal and go on that side. Now, the one which cracked the floor, when it landed on the ship, nothing happened. The ship didn't even move. Okay. So there was a lot of examples I can tell you. Like, there's another one which I personally went through. There is a shot of this chopper lifting off from a city center. Okay. So when the chopper is lifting off, so I happened to shoot top angles there when we were shooting the plates, you know. So that was the end of the day. The entire crowd which had gathered there to watch the shoot had dissipated by then. You know, a few people standing here and there. That's where I took the top angle. Now, when I see the edit finally, the composited final material I'm watching, they're like, I mean, they have put a chopper in my frame, and the chopper is the foreground, and the people are there. I said, this is ridiculous. because some two guys are smoking and talking there, the three guys walking away from there. I said at least one person would look up this chopper going up. That should have made some sense.
You remember that research project, what I wanted you to be part of from Singapore one? It is called Framing the Virtual. That was the title of that research project what I was doing. It was funded, but by the time I had to leave. This is exactly what I was trying to address. Because in CG, you have the freedom to frame anyhow and move the camera any which ways you want, right? Which is very, very different from the real world. The beauty of the real world movement is also the physicality of it, which restricts in a certain way the movement. We try to overcome, but still there is a physical aspect of the camera which exists, which becomes the realism. Whether it has been ingrained in our minds over a period of time, otherwise, but there is definitely one. For example, the shot what you mentioned, the chopper we know it cannot be shot like that. Even though we don't feel it consciously, in a subconscious mind, it is a fake shot. That shot itself can derail the narrative.
Exactly. That was my argument.
Yeah. So it happens.
And I'm saying the peripheral elements has to respond to what is happening in this, which is
correct. Even the frame only
cannot happen like that.
Cannot happen like that. Let us even say they are all looking.
Yeah.
But that's a very
unreal
thing. With respect to that sequence, if it's an animation thing, if it's a different world setup, leave it.
Correct.
But to make
in reality, you immediately it will get disconnected. I had a very funny experience actually, which was the VFX producer comes to me and says, like, I want to show you something in the office. Okay, so he opened his laptop and showed me the same sequence of one of the cuts of the same sequence where the chopper is lifting off from Connaught Place and it's going up and flying off. So I saw it. I said, go back, and again 2-3 times I saw it. Then I started talking. So I said that shine on the the head of the chopper could be better. Like it's looking a little plastic, and you used a matte paint of the thing. And maybe I think it was a little shiny and all that. So I had around 20 suggestions. The blades can have some this thing. He listened to that completely, and after all that, he told me, the chopper is what you shot.
What you shot?
I added Connaught Place beer. I just kept looking at him. I said, no, I didn't shoot the chopper. Now I have to get out of it. So I said, no, I didn't shoot the chopper. He said, no, Film City, you remember the chopper came? So you had shot a chopper like it. I just pulled out the camera and I shot the chopper. It was not part of any sequence. So he pulled out that chopper from there and changed the Film City and put Connaught Place. So we go with even me go with the belief that chopper is the one which is made by the VFX person.
But let me tell you, I think I don't know the shot, or I have not seen the shot. The reason why you had to react to that one only because there is something wrong in that shot.
Maybe. But I'm saying why I didn't look at it. Why I didn't look at the Connaught Place. Why I looked at the chopper.
Because, of course, then, that is a usual thing. You get the chopper to add.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or rather, you would think that chopper is a CG chopper.
That's what I'm saying.
CG chopper, right? But the reason why you thought that way, because there was definitely something wrong with the shot. It could be perspective problem, it could be light matching problem. Then you reacted to that one.
That is the reason why I reacted like that.
And you were reacting because you are a technical person, you are a cinematographer. But as an audience, then they'll know it's
a subconscious thing that it doesn't work. That's what I was saying earlier. It is when we talk about reality aspect of a VFX thing, it comes from various sides, various angles, various perspectives.
It stems from the mechanism what we have, which to sense danger. So we have a kind of data within our mind, which is what is real. If something is off, then it is always a pointer that there's something wrong here, something wrong here, some danger. So that's a basic fundamental human mind which always looks out for anything dangerous to protect ourselves. It's our defense mechanism. And when you see a shot which is it is off, immediately we know there is something wrong. We are being fooled. So be cautious. Is what our subconscious mind says.
But I was saying ki many a time when people say the VFX is bad in a film, you are probably looking at 10% of the VFX which has gone bad. And the 90% which has worked, you don't even realize that they were VFX.
Yeah, I mean, in 3 Idiots, we had 100 shots. Okay. So tell somebody that there were 100 VFX shots in 3 Idiots, they will bend their brows and say, what is it?
Exactly. I was giving as an example to somebody the shot from Beautiful Mind.
The pigeons.
The pigeons.
Oh, I always...
You know, how they use it. We will never think something like that, So the pigeon... And it only somewhere in the back of your mind, you think there is something wrong with it, but you never pinpoint it even. That you only say that there is something wrong.
Only working in visual effects, no? When Jurassic Park first came, I went for the first day, first show to see visual effects. By the time film got over, that's when I realized, oh God, I came for visual effects. I didn't see that. But then again, second or third time is when I started looking at visual effects shots. So the narrative, and more importantly, none of the shots took you off from the story because of the believability. And if I'm not mistaken, there are only 11 minutes of CG in that.
Oh. Okay.
So the decision, which is what I was talking earlier, the decision of what needs to be done in animatronics and cinematically. If you remember, there's a kitchen sequence in that, inside a kitchen. The two kids inside that.
I remember that.
And under the door, there's a circular glass thing.
You knock.
And through this thing you see, and it's an animatronic. Somebody is holding the neck part and then steam through the nose, and it gets frosted. And there are shots from under the table, wherein the pause, which is the shoes.
Yeah.
The emotional tension which is created by those shots, and the people who made that one, the way they walk is also that. So there is, though the guy who's wearing, he's an actor in a way. So all these aspects made me forget that it is visual effects, and I watched the film in spite of earning my bread in visual effects. I watched the film as a regular person.
This is even the edit pattern of every VFX sequence. You have to know that it's a VFX sequence, and the edit pattern has to be in a different way so that the VFX works, so that the story works, so that the storytelling and the emotion associated with that works. So this element is something which I don't see in many films, or we don't put focus into that. So when I'm saying the edit pattern has to be different, that means the shooting pattern has to be different. The shot breakdown will be in a different way. So we have to take into consideration that this part is going to be done by VFX. The shot breakdown has to be to accompany that, to
which is what worked for Jajantaram Mamantaram. We all knew what was going on. We all knew our limitations. So Samitra was willing to make changes. Panda was willing to shoot it accordingly. And the editor, he was willing to edit it accordingly. We were willing to compose it accordingly. So all of us knew.
Because it is a hierarchy-less situation.
That's right. So when you tell Samudra understands, and he is willing to do that one. So, but I've also worked with other directors. They think that everybody else is subordinates. They are hired to do what I'm asking them.
That's an Indian situation. This hierarchy, which we
try and keep those directors away, or rather, I would, if given a choice, I will not.
The other aspect which we did touch upon, like the various aspects with the VFX work schedule in that sense, which is like engineering. Like I've seen you making so many things coming out of somewhere. Cinematography definitely is part of it. Architecture, need to understand the architecture very well, whether it is interior or exterior. And physics, obviously. Like everything is related to physics. Style, storytelling, and softwares there are so many, tangential things which you have
Correct.
to get into to get a VFX correct, right?
Sometime back, we were doing a period film. So I insisted that, look, listen, we have to have the designs way before we go on shoot. Otherwise, I'm not shooting, period. So the art department, the production design department started sketching. I said, to my mind, I don't want to step into this thing and hurt anybody. But they got hurt at the end of this thing. You start with initial sketches as a designer. Then let's just come to the details of the scene. And when it came to the details, the scale is completely gone for a toss. Okay? For example, a king's darbar is 3 times a football stadium.
Oh my God. How did that happen?
Because it's paper and pen or
You
whatever.
can draw whichever way.
So it is. I calculated. I said, okay, if you keep a person here, it'll become 3 times the stadiums. So tell me, in that era, what could have been the beam? And it is a historical. Okay, can't go berserk on that one. Now, number of steps. You have 6 inches to 8 inches per step for a regular this thing. No? So you calculate that one and a certain degree, then the horizontal distance of the staircase, such that the other things have to fit in. You can't just put a random staircase there and scale it. And when you put a person there, the step is like 30 feet high. You need sub steps for that one. So when you mentioned architecture, forget about the architectural era and all that. The basics of architecture has to happen. Height, length. So you should have a scale in your mind and understand which era it was. What was the material used? What is the strength of materials? And if it is stone, the stones are stacked. So the weight of the stone itself is the strength of that one. So they were load-bearing one. So then comes the wall thickness. Yeah.
An explosion happening in such an area would be entirely
would be very, very different. That stone is going to get blasted off like that. So then this, as human beings, we have it in a subconscious mind. It might not be very, in a conscious level, it might not surface. But when you blast a house with a stone, with the amount of blast which is happening, you know it is fake.
right.
That is why when you see the real footage of the war which is going on and blasting, it is real because it behaves. Materials. So like that, every aspect of it, be it you make such a large this thing. How are you going to frame a door which is 60 feet high? What is that frame you would get in a close-up?
Oh, this is an issue which I fight every day actually in my set. I walk into the set, which is like though the set is packed without even a foot outside the set in the studio, and it's not a very big studio, so they put a 25 feet high entrance. I got only 10 feet behind to shoot that, so this thing will never come in my frame. Okay, even if it comes in my frame, the arch above that, even if I bring that, suppose I do a tilt down or something, the arch what I'm seeing is the catwalk and the entire ceiling. So I said, I'll do it. You need to touch it up. You need to make a thing there, which doesn't happen. Which happens after the edit. So finally they throw away the shot. So finally
money wasted.
Shooting time wasted.
And it doesn't look correct.
No.
It doesn't look real.
Finally, the space, the sense of the space which you should bring into your frame, which tells the story, it's not there.
Yeah. So every aspect of it, as you mentioned, the like the knowledge of lens. Uh, what would a lens do to that image geometry? And what that image geometry, how does it translate into emotion? What a 100 lens at 20 feet, what would it do? Versus the same frame edge on a 35 at 10 feet. What is the difference between
In terms
these
of
two?
depth of focus and all
Correct.
that.
What is the difference between an IMAX film with an 100 lens? Just not the frame, but the way the image geometry pans out,
Yeah.
and what that the emotional response which you get from that frame.
Yeah, yeah.
Even the same area is covered,
Yeah.
is different. So we can go to no extent on this,
Yeah.
but as a visual effects supervisor, I believe that whoever is handling that one has to have a certain amount of knowledge, just not about common sensical knowledge. You have to go beyond that
Yeah, yeah.
to understand these things such that you can utilize to tell the story further, or you can avoid mistakes, as you said,
Yeah.
when seeing this thing. So it is
So
important.
if it is creating reality has so many complications involved in that. So what happens when you create non-real things? When gravity is
That's what we see all the time. Nothing is real.
but when they do it, even the non-real things are real.
That's why they call it Unreal Engine. Yeah, but so to create alternate realities, again, to my mind, what is reality? And what is the aspects which you can change in the real world? What can be tweaked and what needs to be anchored? For example, when Spider-Man, all of us know that he can't go like that, right? But the physics of the swing and the way he lands and the way he contacts and the flight, you still have to experience the weight of Spider-Man. He cannot be paper thin. He cannot be made out of cotton. He is as heavy as what we see. And if I have to swing that weight, there is a certain physics involved in it. So you anchor that one there. And you take off that non-flyability as this thing, but you emphasize the other factor such that you believe, you feel he can fly.
What were you doing in Singapore?
Well,
Felt sick of here and left.
I had good fun because I was teaching there in the university. Teaching was a small part, but I wanted to do some research because it is a research university. So that university had fantastic infrastructure. I had a complete motion capture lab to myself. There's tons of computers. Singapore, in fact, I had access to 2,000 computers. I could just go berserk. And some things when we are here in an industry working with tight schedules, there's something which you just can't do by way of time, by resources, and you don't have that kind of a framework. So what we are speaking about, framing the virtual, is something which I've always faced. Everything is nice, fantastic, but the camera movement just went for a toss. It has gone through flame. It is above the chopper's blade. So the aircraft flies past through the camera. So all this would be fake. It will, however brilliant you model the plane, however realistic is this thing, just the camera work in the CG goes for a toss. So you just can't just figure out what it is. So I was trying to figure out like how, let's say, 4 C's of a cinematography. So does that work in, do we have to follow that one? If we have to follow, how do we follow? Can we add one more C, or can we break that one? And can we frame a set of rules, even in CG, saying that, look, listen, you can do all that one, but these are the fundamental rules. You follow this one, even if you want to break it, realize that this exists and you consciously break it. But for that, we had to provide them with a fundamental. So there are few other research projects which I was doing based on. So this is what I was.
This is basically on virtual production.
Virtual production was a part of it, but the one which we were planning to do, which is purely cinematography in virtual world. When I say virtual world, it means visual effects and virtual production, whatever.
What is virtual production?
The way I look at virtual production is to mitigate the green screen fatigue and get back all the key players or partakers of filmmaking back into collaborative process of filmmaking. In short, when we are doing a green screen, I don't want anybody to see the green screen. The cinematographer should be able to frame the screen the way he used to. So that the cinematographer composes the frame, not the compositing guy. Then it is unified, because cinematography is one person who knows the story and who knows the framing, who knows the sequence, who knows the edit pattern. He frames it, and we follow that on.
Basically, he get to see a composited image when
he gets to see a composited image, not just the composited image. When you're composing, earlier when we said, okay, when you panned it on, there was an empty space. So you ask the art director or the art department to move something in.
Correct.
You should be able to do that.
Okay.
So you move it in, then you are happy with the composition, then it is sealed.
As real as it can get.
As real. Then you can, of course, take it further. But the cutoff point is what you have already composited. That's a way, so you get involved in it as a cinematographer. The director is seeing what the frame would be, probably to 70% or 60%. But good enough to build the narrative on the go also, or to make sure that the narrative is on the track. The actor is seeing what's happening. The art director is seeing. Everybody on the set would see what's going on like a real thing. So this I've been using virtual production tools and techniques to get back the filmmakers into that. But yes, the LED screens are there. It creates wonderful images. It's as good as shooting straight off. It has its own limitations. I'm still doing a lot of research on that, and I'm continuing some research with one of the universities. I look at this point in time. The way I'm looking at it is another tool, like the green screen. This is another tool which is added to filmmaking process. This is not the final solution or anything. This cannot be just the whole solution, but it's a great tool, absolute great tool.
How real is unreal?
It is quite crazy, actually. I was telling it used to take 7 hours to render one frame, which it would look no way real. No way real. It's just, I'm talking about 1993. So 7 hours per very bad looking frame to 120 frames in a second. And to an untrained eye, which looks pretty real. Huge jump. And the Unreal Engine or any game engine, the sheer aspect of real-time render, which brings in the interactive nature. When I said you can ask the art department to move something in so that it fits into your composition, which means that the light the way that object catches light to the object's shape, what object is that one, all of it has to fall in place, which only happens on a rendered image. It's just not about a gray image, what is there, right? Rendered image. That brings in another level of sophistication for your composition. So what a real-time rendering engine is doing today is unbelievable. And Epic Games, the Unreal Engine, has taken a big lead, and they've really gone all out to educate people about it. Every 6 months or whatever, they are coming up with versions which you never thought would happen. Unbelievable. It is really unreal.
Come into filmmaking scenario in a big way.
in a big way, in a big way,
Okay.
in a big way, in multiple ways. It could use those images as it is, like the way it is being shown right now against the LED screen, but as background creation for compositing, real-time compositing. Pre-visualization is one of the, because what we were saying earlier, designing shots. This plays a very, very vital this is.
So filmmaking is going to get back to studios probably. Most of it. A lot of it probably.
Lot of it. So rather, when it comes to technically complex films being made, wherein a lot of green screen filming would be there, or whatever we can call it as, then which means that all of the partakers need to be on the same page. That's where the pre-production comes in. So the techniques used in film pre-production will have to be strong enough to get everybody onto the same platform.
But it
This
will be,
helps.
even for simpler films, it will be much easier to have it in a studio probably, much cheaper probably to make it, and
Yes.
all that will come in. So who are going to lose their jobs?
I think it will only create jobs.
Only great jobs.
Only create jobs, because then more
The
possibilities.
travel agents will lose their
Travel agency will definitely. But I think probably I don't think even travel agency, because these guys will get a vacation to travel.
So they'll finish it in 20 hours.
Instead of 80 hours. They can actually at least go home, if not to. So,
Okay.
so it is like, when email came, paper companies got scared.
So
Because they thought
nobody's going to print.
nobody
send
going to
letters,
print. But
England's-
in fact, it was the other way around. A lot of communication happened because of the email, and a lot of printouts had to be taken.
Yeah.
One technique is that if they have financial gain, I remember in Toronto when we were shooting, we had to hold a large green screen up. So I told the producer, can we get 2 cranes? Because I saw the cranes were there. So he said, why crane? It's an industrial crane. He said, it is much easier for the crane to pull it up. So because there was a local producer who was a Canadian, he got it, okay, we can get 2 cranes to hold it up. So, and that worked because there was financial gain for the producer, because he saved money and the cranes made money. So somewhere it looks like it has to tie back into the financial aspect of it.
That's some training which I keep saying even in film schools, This is the parallel training which they need to be given, like the implications of the financial implications of every decision which you make. So I was telling this story to somebody. I was shooting a documentary long time back, 20 years back. So this group came from BBC in London. I was shooting for. So we were shooting in South India for 2 weeks. We were shooting there, and one day he told me that like tomorrow morning we'll get up early and go and shoot a sunrise. So we have been shooting continuously. I was very tired. I said like, why sunrise morning? Get up and all that. So I need a sunrise like to shoot. I said like, you have your BBC library, there must be thousands of sunrises. Just go and pick up one of that. Why do you need to shoot now? He said, yeah, I can do that, but I don't think my budget allows me. I said, what is budget coming in? It's your library, you take it. He said, no, it doesn't work like that. He said, I am given a budget. What I do with that budget is my call. But I have to deliver a product to them by the end of the day. Otherwise, I will be pulled up. But anything which I use from there or anywhere, I have to pay. So if I am pulling up a shot of sunrise from the BBC library, they'll charge me for that. They'll deduct that much from my budget.
There you go.
So he said, I was very, very surprised by this, So he said that is how it works. So every piece, every penny is accounted for. Everything is, you can't just randomly go and do things. This is a disciplined way of functioning, basically. So this is something which I was taking a class in a film school, final year students. So when I walked in, it's a lighting workshop. So I said, we designed all that and plan and everything is made. So I said, make a requirement. No, each one of you write light. So I said, why? We have everything in the store. I said, no, I need to know. So I made everything. pulled out paper, the tore paper from their books, and wrote a requirement and gave it to me. I said, "Don't give it to me. Keep it in your pocket. I'll ask for it later." So they kept it, and we did the lighting for around 3-4 days. And then the last day I said, like, now go and count what all we did. How many lights I used, how many cutters, how many cables, how many flags. I said, make a complete list of what we used. So they made that. I said, now pull out that paper from your pocket and compare it with that, what you have done. It was a complete eye-opener for them. Nobody ever thought of, like, this is how we are going to do that. I said, when you reach Bombay tomorrow, next month, or after a couple of
You will
months,
get what is written in the paper.
I said, this is the first call you get. A production assistant will call you and say, give me a requirement. And you will have to give a requirement. And if that requirement is not sufficient, you will, on the shoot, you have nothing to shoot. Nothing comes there. If it is too much, the evening the production will come and ask you, like, why did you order for so many things? You will not get a job after that. So I said, this is a very critical aspect, which after 3 years, you haven't been trained on that. So this is the accountability aspect, which is actually plaguing every aspect of Indian life, in fact. Correct. From politicians to government employees to
visual effects guys.
To visual effects.
The last, because they don't even get to go home.
Yeah. So that is something which is... Yeah, those are the things which I wanted to talk about, to connect it to things, the way we live, we think, the way we make things. Somewhere, if these conversations make some change somewhere in people's thinking, I'm looking at students and coming out into the field now to think about that. So, is there anything else which you want to talk? Like, anything which we missed out, or?
We covered quite a bit. Each point is actually can be on its own. And for example, education. For example, the collaborative process of filmmaking, visual effects as an art form. What would make what is required for a visual effects supervisor to, what would you keep, like a musician doing practice every day? What would a visual effects supervisor should do every day? So each of them is like a universe in its own. Then another thing is, a lot of people think because visual effects, because it's a techno art form, you have to have grip over both. And if you are doing professional work for features, then it's just not about grip. It's about deep understanding of knowledge of both the sides. So how do you acquire this knowledge base? Today it is much easier. When I started off, there was no internet. Internet was a dial-up network, which was not much of a use, and information was not available at all. I still remember when we recorded, the print was not coming up. I didn't have anybody to kind of ask for help or ask what's going wrong.
The forums are not there.
Are not there, and hardly anybody. So you have to sit and figure out for yourself. You have to fend for yourself, and you have to deliver. So basically, understanding both aspects in terms of narrative as well as technical. All these are a universe in its own. So you can keep on going.
For someone who wants to get into VFX business VFX as their profession, where should they start?
Good question, because probably there are many places you can enter in. The way where I entered is actually observing things. You have to keep on observing and ask questions to yourself. And today it's much easier to find answers. For example, when I was teaching there in university, the first semester, I was teaching visual effects 2. The visual effects 1 was taught by somebody else in a semester. The next semester they come to my class with visual effects 2. So in the visual effects 1, we have designed it in such a fashion that most of it is technical, compositing, this, that, and so it is. So a lot of people come with the idea that compositing is visual effects. When they come to my class, it's the other way around. the first exercise what I used to do is I'll ask what is the length of this table, what's the width of this table, and towards the end of that particular, not semester, class, I've kept multiple tapes. This around 10 of them are going and finding. Let you guess the height and measure and see how off you are to get the sense of scale. So from there on, there are many exercises which I give like that. So it takes a few classes for them to realize that, look, listen, this is a vital aspect of visual effects to have the size, scale, and nature of things. Like for example, in modeling, when modeling, why is the wood looking like wood? Why is metal looking like metal? So when you build a material, there's a tab in software which is metal. But what happens there? What happens when the light hits an object? Because in software we have diffuse layer, specular layer, the coat layer is there, many layers. What is diffuse layer? What happens when a ray hits a object? What is the interaction with that? If you don't understand that, you only have the sliders, and you will hold a wrong slider and slide. You'll never get it correct. Or you'll have to work 80 hours to get it correct. So, in short, somebody wants to get into visual effects supervising or serious visual effects, this thing, expect 3 hours of learning process every single day. I do that every single day. 3 hours, come what may. Apart from the work what you do, you have to spend 3 hours. How you do it, like while driving back home, you have to do it.
Okay. That's superb, Biju. Thanks for coming all the way and explaining all this.
It's my pleasure. Murli, thank you for getting me on the show.